Peter Rising, thanks for jumping on the show, mate. Good to have you.
Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure to be here. How are you today?
Yes, going very, very well tonight here for me. Today there for you. Going very, very well.
Yeah.
Now, for everybody, I guess watching and listening, who is Peter? Give us a little bit of an intro.
Oh, yeah, no problem at all. So, yeah, name's Peter Rising. I live in the northeast of England in the UK with my wife and two sons. I been working in information technology for longer than I care to remember. The thick grey hair probably gives my age away a little bit. And, well, no secret, I'm going to be 50 this year, which sounds mad. I can't quite believe that. But so, yeah, I've been working in technology for a long time. In the last sort of 5 or 6 years, specializing in Microsoft 365. The last couple of years, specializing more in the field of security, compliance, and identity, with a strong focus on the compliance aspect side of things. And for my sins as well, I'm a very active member of the Microsoft 365 wider community, getting involved with that. I'm a Microsoft MVP in Office Apps and Services. I do a podcast with my very good friends Rue Campbell and Kat Greenan called Cloud Conversations, and various other community activities.
Yeah, very good. Now, as you said, your focus area at the moment is governance, security, compliance, and that type of area. Now, as we've seen, this may, I guess, have increased, recently as well. But organisations find themselves storing and processing a lot of information, or probably more information than ever before, from lots of different locations. And it's obviously, can be quite difficult for people and organisations to know where to begin, just to make sure that they're complying with industry regulations and GDPR and all those type of things as well. How do people actually get started with all of that sort of stuff?
It varies. It varies, and hopefully, if they come to a proper Microsoft partner who can help them with this sort of journey, then they will get the correct advice. And the key to that is going to be understanding that compliance is not just an IT problem, and that is the biggest mistake that the customers I've worked with will make. They'll say, well, this is for the IT team to sort out. And it's not. It's a team sport. There's a hashtag that goes around amongst my sort of compliance peers on Twitter. Hashtag compliance is a team sport, and it is so true. You need to get the correct stakeholders involved from day one. Compliance officer, chief compliance officer, legal teams, HR will inevitably need to be involved in that. So that is always my go-to advice when people start to engage in these sort of conversations with me where I work. Understand who needs to be involved, get those stakeholders right from the get-go, and that will set you up for success.
And obviously, with the influx and the usage of teams and that type of thing. Are you seeing a lot more, I guess, a lot more focus on the security and compliance? I mean, there's obviously, a big focus now also on cybercrime and cyber criminals and all that sort of stuff. And those type of things are now becoming more sophisticated and, becoming more aggressive as well, and trying to gain access to critical and sensitive information. So being able to secure and protect the data that, as I said before, around regulatory stuff, I guess, are you seeing a lot more emphasis? Are people coming to you, and is that a really big focus now?
Definitely, and it's so nice to see as well, because for probably the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I would say it's been a bit of a struggle to get customers to take that conversation seriously. But I think the pandemic has helped a bit with that, because of remote working, and it's instilled some awareness and a little bit of necessary fear as well into some organizations of, well, how do I control and protect all this with my users all over the place? But the reluctance to talk about these things is no longer there in my experience. We have customers coming to us and taking it seriously, whereas they would see it as a nice to have a couple of years ago, and they wanted all the shiny, lovely stuff like Teams and SharePoint in modern intranet sites and all the good stuff without having to think about the housekeeping of how you secure and protect that and protect your right. And it all starts with identity. One of my go-to phrases is, I've got a string on my back with this is identity is the modern security perimeter. And it's so true. That's what I always say to my customers. Think of it in those terms. You're not able to wrap a firewall around the cloud in the traditional sense. So start with focusing on protecting your modern identities, and you'll not go far wrong. And we're seeing so much traction now from customers who will say, we need this. We need information protection technologies, data loss prevention technologies. We've got to be mindful of this in order to feel safe and secure and protect our business. And that ties in with licensing as well, because licensing in Microsoft 365, what a minefield, but there is now a lot less reluctance, to have that discussion about uplifting to E5, because there's so much good stuff in E5, but obviously there's that added cost, making that step up. So justifying that it's becoming easier to justify that to customers, I find.
What about some I guess some best practices and that type of thing? What are some easy ways for people and organisations that are I guess are just starting out in this type of environment? What are some key things where, or key areas that they could start? Is it just simply turning on two-factor authentication, or those type of simple things that can get people started before diving headfirst into the more advanced information protection and rights management, all that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you do nothing else, please turn on two-factor authentication. MFA in Microsoft 365, it's so easy to enable, even if you don't have conditional access, which comes with Azure AD Premium P1. You can do it with the security defaults, which come as a bit of a sledgehammer approach now with new tenants. They are enabled by default now, and they will give you some levels of protection. But you can also enable MFA right from in the Office 365 portal and target it to users that way. It's very, very simple to configure with the authentication methods on your mobile phone, the Authenticator app, send a text. It's very, very straightforward to set up, and it can save you so much hassle if you do get a breach. Nothing's ever foolproof. If somebody is determined enough or capable enough, that they'll always find ways to get into things, but it's going to really reduce that attack surface and prevent things like lateral movement. And because bad actors are very patient, they are willing to hang around and get persistency and elevate their privileges and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of these threats are undetected for a scary amount of time before they can get detected sometimes in these environments. So the principles of it starts with MFA, but that is really the basic principle of what the buzz phrase now is calling zero trust. And adopting a zero trust posture for organizations using any cloud technologies really is a good policy, a good philosophy to have, in my opinion. Assume breach, use the principle of least privilege wherever possible. And there are ways to do this, to roll this out where you're not going to disrupt your users too much, because that's the key to it. There's that balance between security and disruption to the users. And that all comes down to communication and preparing them for these new technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, I've seen that as well. I mean, where IT teams, well, not to bang on about IT teams, but may have just turned on two-factor authentication straight away, and then all of a sudden, I mean, no change management, no that type of thing as well. And it's just caused a lot of issues. So there's a lot more. And you're right what you were saying before about it's not all a technology thing. There's a lot of user aspects that need to be considered as well. Who are we sharing with? All those sort of policies and things around our information, rather than just relying. Yes, the technology is very, very good, and there's some things that you can put in place, but a lot of it is about also about educating the users on what is best practice and how to do everything like that. Do you find that that organizations tend to want to rely a lot more on technology than the user side, or is it a bit of a mixture?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a mixture. I think there's definitely more of a willingness to have that reliance in place now. But I think this has been an organic evolution, really. Again, harping back to the pandemic, I think things have happened, things have come into play with these sort of experiences and decisions in organizations where it may not have happened if we didn't have COVID-19. We might have got there, but maybe it's not as quickly. But definitely there's been that organic sort of gravitating towards putting these sort of technologies in place and seeing them as a necessary evil. That's a bad way of putting it, really, because I evangelize this technology, and I know if you do it right, if you do it correctly, it can support the technology rather than disrupt it, and that's the key to it. When you talk about security, cybersecurity across the whole industry, there's a perception that cybersecurity is there just to secure things, and it's not as simple as that. It's a service. We are in the service business to make sure that things are not disrupted, that service continues as uninterrupted as possible in as seamless a manner. So definitely, that's how things are going in my view, and it's only a good thing.
If we turn our attention a little bit more to, I guess, to Microsoft Teams specifically, and obviously the rise of usage of Microsoft Teams is very well known. Now, I'm sure you're like me, and you see a lot of organizations that jumped into Microsoft Teams probably because they had to, instant messages and meetings, and then it kind of organically went to, let's create a team for just collaborating on this document, or let's create another team for this and another team for that. And now there's a big proliferation of teams and documents all over the place, and not people not knowing where they are, and that obviously is a security risk and that type of thing. How are you seeing the best approach to try and rein in that proliferation of teams, and I guess some best practices around governance and that type of thing with teams?
It is difficult because Teams was rushed out so quickly in many organizations through necessity when workforces suddenly had to start working from home overnight with COVID. So it's kind of closing the stable door after the horses have bolted. But team sprawl was definitely one of the effects of that, where, I mean, this was even before COVID. This was something that happened if you didn't control who could set up teams and what the naming policies were, and with Azure AD group creation, because when you create a team, you're creating an Azure AD group to be as the supporting mechanism for that. Then you're going to get teams all over the place, and it's not uncommon for curious users to say, oh, this new Teams thing, when it came in 4 or 5 years ago now, what's that all about? Oh, I can create a team. Oh, yeah, I've done that. They don't know they've created a group. There's no naming policies in place. There's no blocked sort of wording for the teams, that sort of thing. So all of a sudden, administrators have got, well, God, there's teams and groups all over the place. How am I going to deal with this? So it is difficult. And if you're in that position, you do have to go back and do a little bit of housekeeping. And what you can do, though, is you can set group expiration up to come into play for those teams, for those orphan teams, if you like, that nobody knows why they're there or why they were set up, and they've got nothing in them. Well, if they've got nothing in them, they're probably safe to get rid of. But yeah, going forward, if you're doing it from scratch now and you have the time to do it properly and plan for it and plan for that change and introduce it to your user base and communicate and change control and all that good stuff, then you would take those. Well, I would advise and hope that you would take those steps to diligently have a strategy for introducing teams. Do you need suffixes or prefixes in front or behind of your team names, and how are they going to be provisioned? Is there going to be rules in place for private and public teams, and setting up sensitivity labels for teams, which you can now do as well? Sensitivity labels for information protection can apply to container level objects like Teams now, and SharePoint sites, and 365 groups, or Azure AD groups, whatever you want to call them. So yeah, it's definitely something organizations should be thinking about either way. If they're in that unfortunate position of having just go get Teams out there, now is the time. There's no better time than now to go and look at it and say, well, we need to get a hold of this. We need to govern this and make sure that we have things in place, that we've got an effective information protection strategy in place with labeling, that we are looking at things like DLP is a sore point with me for Teams, because you need an E5 license for DLP with Teams, which if anyone from Microsoft is listening to this, they'll think, oh God, here he is banging on about this again, because I've been banging on their door for a long time saying, oi, what are you doing with this? This is just lunacy. So hopefully eventually they'll listen. But yeah, there's lots of good things that you can be doing, and it's important to look at those, whatever stage of your Teams journey you are on.
Well, you can see, even just listening to your, go through all of that, there's a lot there that to unpack as well, and you can understand how organisations get very overwhelmed with what there is and what they have to achieve. Is this an area? Is it an area that you find is best rolled out incrementally, or sort of big bang approach, and everything that you've gone through there, lifecycle management policies, prefixes, suffixes, sensitivity labels, is a best approach to do it all at once, or can it be done incrementally?
I'm going to give the classic answer of it depends. But in general, yeah, it depends. The good old it depends answer. But in general, as a general rule of thumb, in most cases, I would say it is better to have that gradual approach, that crawl, then walk, then run. Pilots, proof of concept, a small pilot group is, in my opinion, the best way to start out. And in doing so, I always encourage to get the right people involved, get senior leadership involved, get the correct stakeholders from different disciplines involved, get your evangelist users involved, the people who are frustrated IT professionals who will think of themselves as IT experts, but they're really not. But they can be your allies, the people who in the workplace, I always go back to the days when I used to work on premises in an office, and I would be sitting in the lunch area at lunchtime eating my lunch and next to colleagues, and I would be excited about a particular feature, and they would go, oh, here he goes, the IT geek again. But so they're not likely to listen to me. But if you can get somebody doing a non-IT job, a salesperson or a marketing person or whatever, evangelizing that, they might take them more seriously, because they're not an IT geek, they're a normal person. So they might listen to that. But by the same token, I always flip that on its side as well. I always say, involve in your pilot group as well the more challenging users, the ones who are going to ask the awkward questions and pick it to pieces, because they're the ones who are going to pipe up on day one when it goes live and give you the age-old cliche of, well, the old system was better than this. This never happened the old way. So get them involved from early stages, get them on your side as well, and get their brutally honest feedback, and then you can say, good point, but we can resolve that by doing this, and that. So definitely in general, I would say go crawl, walk, run. I apply that principle to most scenarios for M365 deployment.
And another area, I guess, of security compliance is around eDiscovery, and I see a lot of conversations, a lot of almost confusion about what eDiscovery actually is and what it does. Can you give us a little bit of an insight or an explanation of, high level, what eDiscovery actually is, and why, I guess, implementing that and why it's so important?
Yeah, sure. Well, eDiscovery or electronic discovery, what it actually stands for, there are really three forms of it within Microsoft 365, and it starts very basically with something called content search, which is the ability to search for content within Microsoft 365 locations, so Exchange mailboxes, Teams and groups and SharePoint sites and so on and so forth, and see the results of those searches. So that's the most basic form of eDiscovery, if you like. Controversial to refer to content search as part of eDiscovery in a sense, because on Microsoft's own documentation, they describe it as such. They say content search is part of the eDiscovery suite, if you like. But fellow Microsoft MVP and all around sort of compliance legend Tony Redmond, who I've spoken to quite a bit about this subject, disagrees quite strongly on that point. He says content search is not part of eDiscovery. It's a completely separate animal altogether, and he's right about that. So the debate will go on. So I thought, in case Tony's watching, I better get that point in.
Well, it's not often. It's not often that you get MVPs not agreeing with Microsoft, is it?
No, that's all. No, very, very rare. No, we never give them any trouble, do we?
No.
Yeah, interesting. But yeah, it starts with content search, and it's kind of fair to call content search a part of it, because the next level up is core eDiscovery, which you get with E3 level licensing, and content search is included in that, and it takes it one step further in that you can export the results out and play with them and view them, and so on and so forth, and put content on hold as well, that sort of thing. The real power comes in on the top level, advanced eDiscovery, which is a completely different animal altogether. It was re-engineered from the ground up. In fact, it was acquired. I forget what the acquisition was, but it was sometime in 2015 or something like that, where Microsoft acquired this technology, which they now brand Advanced eDiscovery. And although it does many of the similar things as content search and basic eDiscovery, in that it can search for content, it can preserve content and put it on hold, it can export results and that sort of thing, it's a different animal altogether. But what that can do, above and beyond the lesser versions, is you can do things like annotation and what's the word I'm looking for when you strike things out? The word has escaped me, but when you strike content out to redacted, that's the one. Yeah, redacted. A lot more power, and you can get granular with the advanced eDiscovery searches and apply them to what are called custodians within Microsoft 365. And a custodian is basically an Office 365 user. So you can get that granular, set up an advanced eDiscovery case, define custodians, define locations, get your search criteria all sorted out, what content you want to search for, set that off, export the results to a review set, and then you've got a lot of data. Well, hopefully not too much data to sort through. That's the real challenge. What you put in as your search criteria is key to hopefully what you get out of that, and then you can review that content. Now, I've kind of described what it does before describing why you do it. I've sort of done it backwards. And the reason you would use these tools, there's a number of reasons really, but you could use these for internal investigations, to find content within your Office 3 sort of internal disputes or unfair dismissal or inappropriate communication, that sort of thing. But in larger enterprises, they're more frequently used for legal investigations, litigation, that sort of thing. When you've got legal cases, you might be obliged to look at this content and have it available to be able to be presented, exported, and presented in legal investigations and cases. And it ties into a lot of other technologies within compliance as well. It ties into things like retention policies as well, really, when you think about it, because getting your retention policies is very, very, very getting them right is very, very important, from the point of view that it's equally important not to over retain as it is to retain content for the amount of time that you are required to do so based on your internal policies or your industry regulation obligation, shall we say? And because if you think of it in these terms, if you've over-retained some data, if you, by the regulations, were obliged to keep that data in the organization for maybe 5 years, and you didn't then delete it at the end of that period, if it just remained there, if it wasn't triggered for deletion or a disposition review or something like that, and you've still got it, and then a case comes in and an eDiscovery search can locate that content, identify that, then by the letter of the law, you're probably obliged to provide that when you could have legally deleted it. So you've got to watch out for things like that. So that's where eDiscovery, massively powerful tool, especially advanced eDiscovery. It's a not very well understood tool. And there's not many people in the world who know it that well, really. I count myself as still somebody who's learned. Well, I think of myself as a lifelong learner anyway. But when I think of advanced eDiscovery or eDiscovery in general, I think of a small amount of names in the community who can talk about it with any authority. I think of Tony Redmond. I think of Erica Tolley at Microsoft. I think of Joanne Klein, for example, Raphael Colin, perhaps, but I can't think of many more names. That I'm probably missing a really obvious one, and if somebody's listening who I've forgotten, I'm so sorry. But and to the point where I consider myself not at their level of being able to talk about eDiscovery, yet when you look for eDiscovery or advanced eDiscovery on a Google search, beyond Microsoft's documentation, there's not a lot of information out there, to the point where I wrote a blog about it last year, and to my surprise, my blog on it is something like the third or fourth result on the Google search, which staggered me, really. So definitely it's a very interesting topic.
Yeah, it is interesting, and it surprises me that not a lot more people are, given its importance, that it's not gaining, I guess, as you mentioned, not a wider audience, people that are actually excelling in that area, which is surprising. Yeah,
definitely.
Mate, let's turn our attention a little bit now to a little bit of an initiative, a content initiative or awareness thing that you're doing at the moment. And we'll go back to school. We'll start learning about the alphabet. Now, you're doing this little content creation thing. I think is it called the Microsoft 365 alphabet or something along those lines? Explain to me what that is.
It is. Well, this all came about early this year. I wouldn't go as far as to call it a resolution, because I don't like New Year's resolutions. It was more an overriding sense of, I need to get my blog going again. I've been meaning to do so for a while. I've blogged quite a lot in my community life, in the wider Microsoft community, but I've let it slip the last sort of 6 months or so. So I wanted to start blogging again, but I don't want to blog for blogging's sake. And I thought, I need a series. I need a subject that's going to grab people's attention, that's going to be useful. And normally when I put myself in that position and I'm sort of straining my brain, I struggle to think of anything when I really, but for some reason this idea literally popped into my head. I don't know where it came from. I was channeling something or something like that, but I thought,
moment of madness. I do the
Microsoft, what if I do the Microsoft 365 alphabet or the Microsoft 365 A to Z? I'm sort of calling it both of those things on hashtags, which I'm hoping might take off, but I've never invented a successful hashtag yet, but who knows, maybe this one will take. But really, all it is, it started off with doing a blog post on my blog, which is peterrising.co.uk, and starting with the letter A and trying to think of as many things that begin with A that relate to Microsoft 365 or Azure AD or things loosely connected with those technologies, because there are certain things that have crept in as I've gone, which I've thought, well, these aren't really pure M365. Like, I'm up to the letter K now, and I think I put Azure Kubernetes in there just to make up the numbers, but that's relevant to people. I think the more stuff we have in there, the better. But the idea is, I didn't really see anything like this out there. A glossary of terms, or if you want to call it that. I think there is a list of that nature. One of the other MVPs pointed me in the direction of a sort of list that's on .com that does this to an extent, but there's not much content in there. It's not that well fleshed out, if you like. My goal was to try and capture near enough everything as much as I could or can. I'm aware that that's near enough impossible, and I'm aware that once it gets finished, because I'm only up to the letter K as we record this, once I get to Z, my job's not done with this. I intend to maintain this, improve this, take people's suggestions on it. I mean, I've had lots of good suggestions on it already, because right now it's only on my blog, in the form of a blog post every day or thereabouts at the minute for each letter, but it's also the full list. And as I'm doing each letter, the full list is taking shape. But some MVPs have said, well, have you considered doing this with it? Have you considered putting it into GitHub and making it a bit more searchable and all that sort of stuff? And there's lots of ideas that are already out there about how this could be improved and be made more useful for the whole community. And I'm definitely open to that. I think what I will do is I'll get to the end of the process first. I'll get through the alphabet and get the list done to the point where that's being completed, and then I can think, well, what more can I do with this now? I'm going to have to keep up to date with this, because we know the world of Microsoft 365 is ever changing, ever growing. There's new products going to come out. There's product renames that are going to happen all the time, like Cloud App Security is now Defender for Cloud Apps, for example, as everything's becoming Defender. So to the best of my ability, I'm going to try and keep on top of this and keep it to be as much of an up-to-date list of Microsoft 365 and Azure AD technologies as I can, and find ways to make it more usable and searchable and accessible to everyone who might make use of it.
Yeah, it's interesting to follow. I've been following it, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes and what it turns into, because it's a good little project. It's going to benefit a lot of people. Now, as we wrap things up, mate, what is it in your area? So you're obviously focused on the security compliance area a lot. What is it that is, maybe that you've seen on the roadmap, or things that are starting to come out now that you think is going to, bring a lot of value to people that they may not know about right now?
Oh, right. Good question. I think one of the things that immediately could spring to mind is within the field of retention. It's still in preview, so I always hesitate to recommend people adopting preview features, because they can change, they can disappear. But adaptive scopes in retention policies, so to give retention policies that more dynamic sort of capabilities. So I think that's going to be a very, very big thing to look out for in compliance terms. I think what was the other thing? There's definitely one other standout thing that is just slipping my mind at the moment. But there are things that sort of don't touch on security and compliance quite so much, but everything does to a point. Everything ties into it at some point. Yeah. But if Microsoft can get it, if they can get it launched, because they've been talking about it for near enough a year now. The other thing that I'm really quite excited about is shared channels, or Teams Connect, or whatever they're going to call it. When they finally get to it, but that was being discussed since Ignite, the first Ignite of March 2021, and then the latter Ignite. And this is one of the frustrations that I think a lot of community folk and MVPs have with Microsoft at times, is that they have these big announcements at the big conferences, and then like make it feel as if these are imminent, these are coming soon, and then 2 or 3 Ignites later, we're still waiting for them. So if they're not ready, if they're not through the engineering process, the R&D process, then why tell us about them? Maybe tell us MVPs about them, because we're under NDA, and see what input we can have into it. But don't get the whole world excited about it, because then we've got customers who say, "Well, I was watching Ignite, and this feature is, when's that coming?" Don't know. We've been talking about it for a year, but yeah. So that's one I am excited about, definitely. If it ever drops. So
yeah, that's right.
But there's always something coming, and I always advise people to keep checking the a couple of places. The Microsoft 365 roadmap is a great place to look at to see what's on the way on the roadmap. You can filter that by technology area, and look in the 365 admin center as well. If you've got access to that, the message center in there, and there's lots of stuff in there of what's getting updated, what's coming soon. They're always working on it, but try and keep on your toes because things change at a rapid pace. Things get renamed.
It is ever changing, isn't it?
Impossible. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you're doing a hell of a lot in the community. You do a lot of content, as I said. You've got your own podcast and things like that. So where can people keep up with what you're doing and what you're up to?
Okay, yeah. So I'm on Twitter. I'm not hard to find because I've got a very distinctive surname as well, which always helps people to find me. But on Twitter, I'm at M365 Rising. I'm on LinkedIn quite a lot as well. Profile name is just Peter Rising, all one word. The podcast that I do with Rue Campbell and Kat Green and when's this going out? Just a quick question. When you going to publish this episode?
As of now, probably around about the 17th of January.
That should be fine. That should be fine because a little bit of an exclusive for you then. We're adding another member to our team. In Cloud
exclusive.
We've recruited another wonderful Microsoft MVP called Azure McFarlane, who you may have heard of. She's based in the States, and she's got a great name for being involved in Microsoft products, obviously. Azure. So Azure's joining the team, and you'll be seeing her alongside Kat and Rue and myself very, very soon. So we're very excited to have her as part of the team, and hope you'll all give her a warm welcome. So by the time you watch this, it'll hopefully all be announced on Twitter. So we couldn't be more excited, though. So Cloud Conversations is on YouTube at youtube.com/c/Cloud Conversations. And the other thing that I do on a regular basis, also with Rue Campbell and with Alan Erdley, who's a former Microsoft MVP in the UK, but now works at Microsoft at the Microsoft Technology Center in London. We do the monthly Microsoft 365 Security and Compliance User Group, which is the last Wednesday of every month. The URL, it's on meetup.com. I think it's something like M365 SNCUG, something like that, but we can send you the link.
I'll post all that.
Put in the notes, and that's about it, really.
Very good. And I will definitely post all of those in the show notes. So for everybody watching, listening, you can jump on there, grab the show notes, and all the links will be provided in there. But mate, really appreciate you jumping on and having a chat. Security, compliance, governance, really, really big area at the moment, and there's a lot of focus on it. It's something that needs a lot of attention and something that's very important. So I appreciate your knowledge and insights and best practices. So thanks very much.
Amazing. Thank you for having me, mate. It's been a blast.